Welcome to Session 1, Communication. In this session, you will learn about body language and attitude, politeness, how language differs between adults and teenagers, and how to understand direct and indirect speech. As a reminder, throughout all the online sessions, you will need pen and paper, so if you do not have them with you now, please go and get them before continuing. You can also use the blank pages at the end of your student handbook to take notes. Think for a second. What are some ways that we communicate with other people? If you think talking or the use of words or texting one another as the only option you communicate, you are wrong. The tone of voice, body language, mimic and gesture, as well as polite and impolite behaviour, also go a long way when we talk about communication. In the next couple of slides, you will learn more about each one of those topics. If you look at the two pictures on the right-hand side, you see 5 people in each of those photos. Which people would you like to meet? Well, I guess you said the one in the top photo. Why is that? Well, let's start with their posture. They're all standing in a very positive and open way. They all have smiles on their faces and they look at you as if they are interested in talking to you. Therefore, eye contact, a smile on your face, and an open posture tells a lot about what you want to say to somebody. The body language, the posture of the people in the bottom photo, they don't look like they're interested in talking to you. They don't even look like they had a good day. Keep in mind that a positive attitude, which includes all of the above, is very important when you communicate with somebody. Also, your mimic and gesture. The people in the bottom photo don't really look like they are interested in anything. They're crouched down, they look towards the floor, they look bored. Well, they even look like something isn't right with them and they don't feel well that day. English is a very polite language, so the words and expressions on this slide are things that you will hear a lot once you are in Ireland. People will say, "I'm sorry" or "I'm very sorry" when they really mean it. If you need to ask someone a question, you might say, "Excuse me, could you tell me the way to the post office?" Or if you ask your host parents for permission to go somewhere, you may begin with, "Hey, may I go to the cinema with my friends tonight?" People will say, "I'm sorry" or "I'm very sorry" a lot when they are really sorry, actually. If you approach a person that you have never approached before, if you need to ask a question, you will probably say, "Excuse me, can you tell me the way to the post office?" Or if you ask your host parents for permission to go somewhere, you will probably start the question with, "Hey mum, dad, may I go to the cinema with my friends tonight?" At the breakfast table, for example, you will also hear things like, "Would you mind handing me the butter, please?" And once, let's say your host sister handed you the butter. She will say, "There you go, you're welcome." And you will say, "Well, thank you, thanks a lot." So all of the things on here are expressions that you will hear a lot in English. When you communicate with other people, the tone of your voice can say a lot about what you are really thinking at that moment. Let's say you ask your host mum for permission to see some of your friends from the football team this weekend. Most likely you will walk up to her and say, "Hey, may I go and hang out with my friends from the team this weekend?" What you did not know is that your host family had already made plans for the weekend. So your host mum answers, "I'm very sorry, but maybe next time. This weekend we're going to visit your grandparents or spend time with family." And now here comes the essential part of this slide. How are you going to react? Let's say you're okay with your parents' decision, right? You're okay. So you can say, "Okay, maybe another time," or you can say, "Okay, that's cool." So, in the tone of voice in that answer, you are still very positive. You don't mind that you can't see your friends this weekend. Your voice tells us that you are really okay with it. If you are, on the other hand, super annoyed that you can't go see your friends and instead you have to hang out with the grandparents, your answer could also sound something along "okay." Well, that "okay" didn't sound as positive. The tone in your voice was very negative, and your host parents are most likely to pick up on that. So, please be sensitive and make sure that you do not sound annoyed or withdrawn or sassy, because that is very impolite. Respect the decisions your host parents made. They usually have a very good reason for their decision, and don't argue. So, this slide is about not the things that you can say, but the things that you can do to be polite. Remember what we just talked about with you going to see your grandparents? Well, let's be honest, maybe hanging out with the grandparents is not the most fun thing in the world, and you would have much rather wanted to spend time with your friends. Well, in a difficult situation like this, also try to keep a positive attitude. Also, be sensitive for other people's needs. Maybe it is important for your host parents to go see the grandparents this weekend. So, keep that in mind when you don't get the thing that you wished for, but instead you do something that your host parents wished for. When it says on here, leave people their personal space, this is something to keep in mind in Ireland too. For example, when people are standing in line in a supermarket or waiting for a bus, they usually keep a certain distance from one another. People appreciate their personal space, so try not to stand too close. They want to have a little bit of personal space. Obviously, and I hope you all know that, don't interrupt when other people are talking. I feel like personally this is something that little children do at the beginning when they haven't learned yet that their opinion is not the most important one. But you guys are old enough now, so obviously when other people are talking, please be patient and wait. The next one, don't talk back or argue. This means when your host parents made a decision, please accept it. I know that most of us were raised in a way that we like to discuss and ask questions. So instead of telling our parents, okay, let's go see the grandparents this weekend. You know, we are more the kind of people that would say, well, but why? And it's so boring to go to the grandparents. I would much rather go see my friends this weekend. This is not fair, etc., etc. This is what we mean when we say don't talk back or argue. Irish host parents won't like that. So here are some examples of polite behaviour. Obviously, when you go into a store or a building, you can hold the doors open for other people. It is very common to give compliments, even to people you do not know well. You might say, I really like your jumper, or those are nice shoes. You can also offer your help, and finally, do not cut in line at a shop or anywhere else. Be patient, even when the queue is long. Also, you can offer your help, and also, finally, don't cut in line at a store. So be patient even when the line is long. Those are just some examples, and I'm sure you can come up with even more when you think about it. I know I have spoken a lot about going to Ireland and everyday English, as you will hear it in Ireland so far, but everything that we have thus far talked about is true for the American or for the English language, I should say in general. The English language is simply a very, very polite language. Now, for those of you going to Ireland, you will see that Irish people themselves, not only by using the English language, but also by the way they behave, they're simply extremely polite people. They will use phrases like, I really appreciate this, or thank you, and hey, I'm so sorry that I'm late. Those are some phrases that you will hear even more going to Ireland. Also, and some of you that have travelled to Ireland before may notice, people in Ireland often greet others in a warm and friendly way as well. So if you, for example, stand in line at the shop to get some items, the lady at the till will probably say, hey, how are you today? I hope you had a great day. Or she will say, hi, I hope you found everything okay today. You may think, does this person know me? But no, they probably do not. This is simply part of the warm and polite way people often interact in Ireland. And because you are going there, we ask you to adapt to that culture too. Why not start practicing now? It never hurts to be polite and positive. And obviously, you going there, we ask you to adapt to this Irish culture. So why not practice yourself before you go? It can't hurt to be polite. It can't hurt to be positive, especially not in Spain. So believing that you still have a good number of weeks left before you head out, go ahead and practice. Now we would like for you to do a quick activity. You have pen and paper. So we want you to write down 3 things that come to your mind. And the question is, where does the language differ when you talk to your friends? Whereas when you talk to your own parents or parents of a friend or even other adults, we want you to think, where is the language or the use of language different? Go ahead, write down 3 things on the piece of paper, then move on to the next slide. Well, of course, language is different when you talk to adults versus you talking to people your own age. It's not only the choice of words, it's also the way we phrase things. I'm sure you wrote down exactly that on your piece of paper. So no matter what country you go to, teenagers are generally less formal when they talk to people their own age. but we will give you an example on the next slide. So let's go back and imagine that you play on your high school football team. After practice, one of your teammates walks up to you and says, "That was a really good practice today. I'll see you tomorrow." You feel good about it? You had a good session? Your teammates were happy and you come home wanting to tell your host parents about it. So your host dad asks you, "Well, how was practice today?" Think about it. Are you going to repeat the exact same words you used with your friends? Or are you going to choose different words and speak in a more respectful way? That is what we mean when we talk about adapting your language to adults. Do not argue, do not challenge every decision, and do not speak to adults as if you were speaking to your friends. When you talk back, it can come across as disrespectful and immature. Respect and politeness matter. They show maturity. This is a sign that you're old enough and that you are accepting other people's decisions. We do understand that communicating in a foreign language isn't always easy. So needless to say, there can be difficult situations ahead of you. One of them is, for example, that you feel misunderstood. Something you said, you didn't even mean it that way. Well, here's what you can do about it. Tell people politely, explain yourself, but be polite about it. Another example that happens often is, for example, at school. If a teacher asks you to stop talking during class, do not start giving excuses straight away. It is much better simply to say, "I'm sorry," and stop talking. If you do not understand what people ask you, tell them politely and ask them to repeat or explain. It is that simple. If you don't understand what people ask you, ask them politely. Tell them politely that you didn't understand. Ask them to please repeat or to explain what they said. It's that simple. So here's a little secret about the different way of communication in the English language. Earlier I mentioned that there's a difference between indirect and direct speech. No, we're not talking about grammar, and we're not in English class right now. We're simply talking about the message people are sending. For example, if your host parents say something along the lines of, "I had a hard time getting through the hallway today." Well, is that all they're trying to tell you? Or what they really want to say is, "Put your shoes away," because they're standing in the middle of the room. Or here's another example. If people tell you, "Hey, your room looks a little messy," well, it's not just to let you know that you have a messy room. Really, it is telling you, "Clean up your room, please," even though they never said those words. The same is true for the sentence, "I think the trash can is full." Well, yeah, the trash can is full, and this is a direct order for you to take out the trash, even though nobody ever mentioned something along those lines. So we want you to be aware of the, let's say, riddles and secrets that are hidden behind certain sentences. We want you to think twice when a host parent tells you something, if this is what they really want, or if there's a hidden message behind those sentences. So, here's a little drawing to show you what we meant with the previous slide. Most of you are probably used to a very direct way of communicating, which you can see on the left-hand side. If your parents want something from you, they will tell you directly. In English, and very often in Ireland, people may not always tell you things directly, because indirect language can sound softer and more polite. So you need to read between the lines and understand what people really mean. Finally, this brings us to one of the last points in this session, how we would like you to communicate with us. In a later session, expectations versus reality, you will learn who your local coordinator in Ireland is and what his or her job is. If you have a problem with anything, whether it is an issue at school or something happening in your host family, we want you to contact your local coordinator in Ireland first. I understand that we all have a tendency to talk to our parents when something is wrong, but think about what happens if you call home first. The message has to travel through more people before it reaches the person who can actually help you. Obviously, if you have a problem and you speak to your local coordinator in Ireland first, the message gets directly to the person who needs to hear it right away. The alternative is much slower. If you call your parents in Spain first, they will most likely contact the Spanish office. Then the Spanish office may need to contact the Irish office, and only after that will the information reach your local coordinator in Ireland. You can see that this line of communication is much longer. It takes a lot more people to talk with each other. There's a lot more room for translation mistakes, etc., etc. And don't forget, there is a time difference. So again, if you have a problem, the best approach is to talk to your local coordinator in Ireland directly, because then we can help you right away. Let us tell you what has happened in the past when students spoke to their parents first instead of their coordinator. Sometimes students only tell half of the story. Naturally, their parents get worried and contact the Spanish office. Later, when the full story comes out, the situation is often very different from what was first reported. That is why we ask you to use the proper line of communication. By the time the full story becomes clear, the situation is often very different from what was first reported. So use the proper line of communication. If you have a problem, try to solve it on your own first, and if you need help, call your local coordinator in Ireland. Don't get your parents involved over here. If they don't need to be involved, you are an adult now, or at least you're trying to become an adult now through this experience, and those are some small steps you can take towards becoming more mature. Congratulations, you made it to the end of your first session. It wasn't so bad, was it? Now please use the communication quiz link to take your test. You may use the notes you took, but please remember the time limit of the test. You can just take it once. After you finish the test, please continue with the next session, which is called Rules and Regulations.